this is an experiment as much for me as for you. And what I decided to do is to make a video that is the backstory or the context or the thought process behind the work. It's not just this work that I'm doing, because this is part of the back process, but the projects that I've done for the past several years and the project I'm about to do. So we'll turn on the video. And what I decided is to not, just one second, is to not to, there was one idea to just show the video, but that seems obscure. And then the other idea is to make it more of an artist talk, where I just talk all the time. And so we're going to experiment and see, like, I'm going to basically watch it with you and then say whatever. Since the work is about the unconscious, I want to sort of engage with that and use all of our unconsciouses to see what happens. And so the idea was, in my work, I make drawings. And but I've been theorizing the idea of making drawings through the unconscious. And then I realized, well, do I even know what that means? So part of the idea is to question, say, okay, what is the unconscious? What does it mean? What does it mean today? So that is the 10 minutes, so it's very short. It's like a dream. It's like a condensed event. So now we can turn it on, and let's see. Also, in terms of the unconscious, I said, all right, well, where does the unconscious come from? And that was Freud. And I started reading Freud again and looking at what he started working with. The unconscious was when he started working with patients who were hysterics. And so there's the hysteric, usually a woman, as you can see, but I found an image of a man, is a person whose body somehow refuses to work in a dramatic way. And as you see, there's this hysterical arch. And I was looking at the first image that you saw, actually reminded me a lot of the poses that they drew or took photographs of reminded me of yoga poses. And that was also interesting about, like, the hysterical body goes into the yoga pose. But what was interesting in Freud is that then what the couch is that you take that kind of a patient who has this dramatic refusal of something is not working, right? The body's not working, the mind isn't working, and it just turns into these, like, motions. And what Freud did is he said, all right, well, we'll put people on the couch, make them not move, and make them talk. And the fact that you could make, so it was called the talking cure. At that point, nobody thought of doing that. The talking cure heals the body. So you can say something, and suddenly the body moves again. So people had, like, like paralysis, the hand wouldn't move, or the, And then the other thing that I was interested with the Freud was that he said, he talks about the line of consciousness leading from the unconscious. And so the drawing is the line that takes it out. Okay, switch. Unconscious working, part 2, museum. So that was on the level of the body. Now, the level of research, so I do research in my projects. The idea is that I work with collections of objects, and I first encountered Freud, actually, when I was doing research in an anthropology museum in Basel, where I was working with their collection, and one of the things I was looking at is what happens when objects come, so colonial times, and then objects come to Europe. Some bought, some stolen, whatever. So you have these huge collections of objects from different countries. And so what happens to culture when they come into European culture? And in fact, I'm very interested in the idea that in the early 20th century, all this influx of objects changed culture. So, and then in the archives, in the museum, because it's quite depressing to be in the archive, and one of the ways that I managed to be there for a longer time is to do these videos, which actually are shown right there, where the body becomes, like, the way of seeing it works as a kind of physical activity. So it's kind of like a dance around the object where my body is engaged in the act of seeing. And that was kind of like, when I started doing that, I could be in the archive a lot longer. So, and what happens? So how do I work? So I would go into the archive, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to do research, and then I'm going to do drawings. And I was kind of nervous to see that some of the drawings were, like, emerging, but I didn't understand, like, this robot. And then I realized, oh, the robot, it's like the body, the idea of the European idea of the body as a machine. And part 3, this is another project And this project took place in Salzburg, where I was invited to interact with a dance archive. And what I did was I found these amazing diagrams. Again, early 20th century, which is a time I keep going back to. So these are dance diagrams done by a choreographer called Laban, who systematized movement, human movement, and created these schematic diagrams. Here, basically what he did was to break down human movement into its components. So each of these little grids represents a certain type of movement. And this was obviously in the early 20th century where they didn't have video, and they wanted to somehow preserve dance performances. So this is a method of dance notation. And what I want to do is to connect this to the idea of the robotic, the language that we communicate to with robots, which is a script or a code, a certain sequence of movements. And so to make that into a metaphor of how that connects to the mind. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to work with thinking about how to represent, how do we think about consciousness or the unconscious, and how do we make projects about it. And given this invitation, I suddenly realized, all right, so the diagrams, when I saw them, they're called Explaining Dance to a Machine. And since there are dance diagrams, they can be performed. And what you see here is a dog robot, and it's actually, this is in Barcelona. And one of the ideas is to get the dog robot to perform the diagrams. And so then the couch. There's the couch, and then there's the body. And one of the things that Freud said is that all he can do is to take people from common and happiness, from abject misery into common and happiness. And one of the things I've been doing is to work with different systems like yoga, and this is Qigong, a Chinese system that works with the body. And the idea is that we don't only think with the mind, but we also think with the body. And by working with the body, we free the mind. And this is also about how you learn the movements or repetition. So this is a form called Bagua, where you walk in a circle. And the idea is that you have a mind-body connection that doesn't just look at the mind as an isolated phenomenon where you can lie on the couch and you become cured by a talking cure, but you actually have to go through the process of engaging the body completely. And that's how you liberate the mind. So it's like another level of engaging. So it's another level of engaging with the mind, but it's also, I think that we aren't just brains, but we are actually whole bodies that think. And then how you move, you learn the movements through repetition also. And there's no sound. And these are Sufis in Egypt. Situation where the mind goes into other states that people experience with drugs also in clubs, but this is done without that. So, my intuition, and this is just an intuition, I'm beginning to work on this project, is that somehow through the medium of dance and through the idea that both our minds and our bodies are quite scripted. And so we learn certain behaviors and certain thought patterns and certain movements, and then how do we relate that to the idea of the robot? And so one of the ideas is to get the dance, to have the dance diagrams performed by this particular robot. And this is this is a robot done by this company called Boston Dynamics. And it's kind of a story. This is actually in Barcelona, like about a month ago. And one of the things that they did was to, it was actually financed by the US military, and they tried to use it, so there's a version of it with a machine gun. This is a home robot. So how do our bodies relate to the machine body? And how do our minds relate to the machine mind? is one of the questions that I want to figure out how to stage. So this project is still very much in the process. I've made the notation drawings, and I'm beginning to work with dancers, but also engaging with people in the artificial intelligence field to figure out how to make performances that can somehow make us think about this. Because obviously it's really hard to figure out how to make a project about artificial intelligence. It's something that we can't represent directly, and this actually very much interests me about the relationship between scientific thought and consciousness, is that really science cannot access consciousness. So we all know it exists. You know, I'm conscious, you're looking at me, we all have the same experience of something which is very real to us, but since we can't measure it or quantify it or define it specifically, there's no real way for scientific thought to access it. And so one of the things I was looking, there's a guy with a console behind it. Is it stopped? Okay, the machine is malfunctioning. Okay, the machine is not working.
You need the rubber.
There's more, but I guess I can just tell you what it is. Is that, so I've been reading, like, I don't know if you've heard about this guy called Ray Kurzweil, who is, obviously a lot of the people who are working in artificial intelligence right now, first of all, what is the presupposition of their thoughts? Is that essentially the brain is a machine, the brain is an object, and consciousness is created as an epiphenomenon of this machine working. So basically, if you could 3D print a brain, or 3D print a body even, and you run a current through it, that would be you. So if you could scan exactly your consciousness and 3D print it, it would be you. Now for me, I don't know why, but that just seems impossible. Now, but that's the premise for this thought. So basically, and then if you can do that, then there's no reason that the computer wouldn't become conscious, wouldn't start to think. And people like Ray Kurzweil say, okay, we're actually in the process where very soon, like 20 years, 40 years, something like that, the machine will start being intelligent enough that it can work on itself. And once it starts working on itself, it can create, the mind becomes much, each time it can recursively create a more intelligent mind, and then we have something they call the singularity, which is a runaway process, where the machine completely takes over. And of course that's scary, and what will happen to humans and stuff. And there's a kind of idea that, oh, well, this is an unnatural process, that somehow the machine is an unnatural thing. But for me, I just was thinking about, well, is that really true? Because like we've evolved from the earth, we don't really have control over it. And so he talks about people evolving into machines. So basically we're in the process of evolving into a completely different life form that's a one machine. And the question is like whether we're just, steps in that process. And if so, what do we do in the meanwhile? And I think that the idea of like collaborating, how do we collaborate with the machine? How do we engage with the machine? And what is the interface between the human and the machine? And so I guess that's the idea that I want to try and work with through the medium of dance. And I'm not exactly sure how that will work, but that's the next step in the process. Okay, and since it doesn't want to go to the end, I guess I will artificially end it right here. But thank you for listening and for dealing with all the technical issues. But I guess that's what we're doing. All right, well, thank you.